His voice was cold, echoing with the false authority of a man who'd never been challenged. "I will not risk a $75 million aircraft on a diversity hire." Captain Robert Mitchell, a veteran of the skies, stared at his new co-pilot, Sarah Washington, with undisguised contempt. He saw her skin color, not her credentials. He saw a quota, not a pilot. In the luxurious cockpit of a brand-new Gulfstream, he made his stand. He refused to fly. But as he reached for the phone to call operations and demand her removal, the man turned pale because Sarah just made a call of her own. "James," she said, her voice like ice. "This is Sarah Washington." "Yes, that's Sarah Washington." "Tell me, Captain, do you know who owns this plane?" The briefing room at the Teterboro FBO was a study in quiet, expensive tension. Teterboro, New Jersey, isn't an airport for the masses. It's the steel and glass kingdom of private aviation, a place where billionaires treat their jets like taxis. And the smell of premium jet fuel is the local cologne. Inside the operations room of Apex Executive Air, Captain Robert Mitchell tapped a sterling silver pen against his logbook. Robert was in his own mind the living embodiment of aviation excellence, silver-haired, 58, with a jawline that had set 30 years ago and refused to budge. He was ex-Air Force. He'd flown F-16s, then transitioned to a major airline, and now, in his golden years, he flew private. He considered himself the best of the best, a man entrusted with the lives of the global elite, and more importantly, with their $75 million toys. He was scheduled to fly the company's new flagship, a magnificent Gulfstream G700, on a priority coast-to-coast run to Van Nuys. Their passenger was Marcus Cole, a tech mogul whose new contract could make or break Apex's fiscal year. Robert hated these new assignments. He was getting a new first officer, a last-minute swap. His usual FO, a reliable, pliable man named Tom, was out on family leave. Robert hated disruptions to his routine. He hated new. The door to the briefing room hissed open. Robert didn't look up, expecting the ground ops manager. "Coffee black, if you're getting one," he mumbled, eyes still on the flight plan. "I'll have a water, thanks. And the latest winds aloft printout if you have it. The EFB uplink seems a little slow." The voice was female, crisp and calm. Robert's head snapped up. Standing before him was a young black woman in a perfectly tailored Apex pilot's uniform. She was pulling her hair back into a tight regulation bun. Her flight bag, a high-end leather, was placed neatly by her feet. Robert's eyes did a slow, dismissive scan. He saw a woman in her late 20s, maybe early 30s. He saw her dark skin. He saw a token. He didn't see a pilot. He gave a short, barking laugh. "You must be Emily, the new flight attendant. Briefing's not for another 20. You can wait in the lounge." The woman didn't bristle. She didn't flush. She simply met his gaze, her eyes a deep, intelligent brown. "I'm not Emily, Captain. I'm your first officer, Sarah Washington." She held out her hand. Robert looked at it as if it were a foreign object, then slowly, reluctantly shook it. Her grip was firm, annoyingly so. "Washington," he repeated, drawing the name out. "Right, the swap. They didn't tell me." "It was a late-notice roster change, Captain. I've already reviewed the dispatch release and the aircraft's maintenance log. Looks like she just came out of a 100-hour inspection. Clean bill of health," Sarah said, moving to the computer terminal. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up weather, radar, and performance charts. Robert watched her, his irritation mounting. He was used to first officers who were tentative, deferential. This one, she acted like she belonged. "How many hours do you have on the 700, Washington?" he asked, his tone that of a prosecutor. 350 in type, Captain. 6,000 total ATP with ratings in the Gulfstream series and the Bombardier Global Express, she replied, not even looking up from the screen. 6,000 hours. Robert was momentarily taken aback. That was a lot for someone her age. He'd assumed she was a fresh-faced 500-hour wonder fast-tracked by a progressive HR department. He quickly recovered his skepticism. She must be lying. or her hours are all simulator time. Impressive, he said, the word dripping with sarcasm. I'm sure that simulator time really prepared you for the real world. I have over 20,000 hours, First Officer. I flew combat missions when you were in diapers. On my flight deck, we do things my way, by the book, but my way. No shortcuts, no new age iPad nonsense. You keep your eyes outside and your mouth shut unless I ask you a question. Got it? Sarah finally turned from the screen, her expression unreadable. She held up her electronic flight bag, a tablet containing all their charts. The iPad nonsense, as you call it, is now company-mandated SOP, Captain, and I'm quite familiar with the book. I prefer to go by it. Shall we review the flight plan? I see a potential reroute over the Rockies due to a significant SIGMET for turbulence. We might want to file for a higher altitude now to save us the request in flight. She was right. He'd seen the SIGMET but had dismissed it, figuring he'd muscle through it. This young woman was not only challenging his authority, she was also competent. To Robert Mitchell, this was the most offensive trait of all. "I'll decide our altitude, Washington," he snapped. "I'm the captain in command. Your job is to run the checklists and back me up, that's it. Now let's go inspect my aircraft and try to keep up." He grabbed his hat and strode out of the room, not bothering to see if she was following. He was already composing a mental complaint to operations. This was unacceptable. He was Captain Robert Mitchell. He didn't fly with affirmative action hires. He didn't care what the passenger manifest said. The real precious cargo on this flight was his own ego. The Gulfstream G700 tail number N700A sat on the ramp like a sculpted blade. It was the absolute pinnacle of private aviation, a $75 million masterpiece of aerodynamics and luxury. Its white and midnight blue livery gleamed under the afternoon sun. Robert felt a swell of pride. This was his world. He began his pre-flight walk-around inspection, expecting Sarah to trail behind him like a puppy. Instead, she took the other side of the aircraft, beginning her own inspection with a practiced, efficient pace. Robert was thorough, but his was the thoroughness of routine. He tapped tires, checked for bird strikes, and glanced at pitot tubes. He was halfway down the fuselage when he heard Sarah's voice from under the starboard wing. "Captain, can you take a look at this?" Robert sighed theatrically and ambled over. "What is it, Washington? A scratch in the paint?" Sarah was crouched, pointing a small flashlight at the wing to fuselage joint near the main landing gear. "It's not a scratch, it's seepage. Looks like skydroll." Robert bent down. He saw a tiny, faint green residue no bigger than a quarter. He scoffed and wiped it with his finger. "It's residual. The maintenance crew were just in there. They probably spilled a drop. It's well within tolerance." Sarah didn't move. "It looks fresh, Captain, and it's coming from the fairing seam, not the access panel. Could be an O-ring on the auxiliary hydraulic pump. The G700 manual is very specific about any unlogged skydroll seepage." Robert's face tightened. He hated being questioned. He hated being corrected, and he especially hated being corrected by her about his aircraft. "First Officer," he said, his voice dangerously low, "I have flown aircraft with half their systems shot out. I know the difference between a drip and a seep. This is nothing. We are not writing up this aircraft and delaying Mr. Cole for a smudge of oil." Sarah stood up, her face a mask of professionalism. "With respect, Captain, company policy dictates we log it. It's a 2-minute entry in the e-log book. Maintenance can verify it's within limits and we'll have it on record. If we don't and that smudge turns into a leak over the high desert, it's our certificates on the line. And I'm not risking mine." She pulled out her EFB, tapped the screen, and began logging the discrepancy, taking a clear photo of the seepage with the tablet's camera. Robert's blood pressure spiked. She had, in the most professional way possible, gone completely over his head. The log was now permanent. Maintenance would have to sign off on it. It was a direct challenge to his authority as captain in command. "You've just added 30 minutes to our departure, Washington," he seethed. 30 minutes of Mr. Cole's time. I hope you're proud of your little CYA maneuver." "I'm proud of doing my job, Captain," she said, finishing the entry. "Safety isn't a maneuver. I'll call maintenance to have a supervisor sign off. You can continue the pre-flight." She walked away, already on her phone, her voice polite but firm. Robert was left staring at the hydraulic fluid, his hands clenched into fists. Oh, she would pay for this. This wasn't just incompetence anymore. This was insubordination. By the time they reached the cockpit, Robert's mood was black. The passengers had arrived. Marcus Cole, a man who vibrated with nervous energy, and his two stone-faced lawyers. Robert had been his most obsequious self. "All welcome aboard, Mr. Cole, and we'll have you in California before you know it." Cole had just nodded, already on his laptop. Now seated in the left-hand seat of the G700 state-of-the-art symmetry flight deck, Robert began his pre-flight ritual. The cockpit was a technological marvel, all dark leather and glowing touchscreens. Sarah, in the right seat, began the before-start checklist, her voice a calm monotone. "Avionics master on. Inertial reference systems aligning." Robert just grunted in response. The maintenance supervisor had, of course, signed off on the seepage, logging it as within acceptable limits per MM3422. But he'd also thanked Sarah. "Good catch, F.O. Washington," the man had said. "This is a new airframe. We're tracking these things closely. Most pilots wouldn't even have seen it." This, of course, only made Robert's rage simmer hotter. Most pilots. He knew that was a jab at him. They were almost done with the checklist. The cabin was secure. The flight attendant, Emily, a young woman who looked terrified of Robert, had confirmed the passengers were seated. Clearance obtained. "Flight plan loaded and verified," Sarah said, her eyes scanning the displays. "Before start checklist is complete, Captain." Robert sat there for a full 10 seconds. Not moving. He stared out the windscreen at the FBO. He could see the operations manager, a man named James, walking a client to a smaller Phenom 300. "We're not going," Robert said. Sarah's head turned. "Excuse me, Captain." "I said we're not going," Robert repeated, his voice flat. He slowly, deliberately began to unbuckle his 5-point harness. "Is there an issue with the aircraft?" Sarah asked, her mind immediately running through potential problems. "Did maintenance call back? Is it the hydraulic leak?" "The issue," Robert said, turning to face her fully, "is you." The quiet of the G700 cockpit, usually a sanctuary of calm professionalism, suddenly felt charged and suffocating. Sarah's hand, which had been poised to advance the throttle levers for engine start, froze. "I beg your pardon, Captain?" she asked, her voice maintaining its professional evenness, though a knot of ice was forming in her stomach. She'd dealt with arrogant captains, dismissive captains, and insecure captains. But this was something new. "There's no begging about it," Robert sneered, throwing his harness straps to the side. "I'm looking at your paperwork. It all seems convenient. 6,000 hours, a G700 type rating right out of the gate. It stinks, Washington. It stinks of HR quotas and diversity and inclusion initiatives." "Captain Mitchell," Sarah said, keeping her voice level, "my credentials are fully compliant with FAA and company standards. They are not up for debate. We have a VVIP on board and a wheels-up time in 5 minutes. We need to start the engines." "We need to do nothing." Robert shot back, his face reddening. He was leaning across the center console, his voice a low, furious hiss. "I am the pilot in command. That means I am responsible for this $75 million aircraft and every soul on board. And I am telling you, I am not comfortable flying with you. Your attitude is insubordinate. Your logging of that leak was a childish backstabbing maneuver. I have a gut feeling, and my gut, which has kept me alive for 20,000 hours, tells me you are a risk. You are a liability. I will not fly with you." The accusation hung in the air, heavier than any turbulence. He wasn't just questioning her competence. He was using the sacred cows of aviation, safety, and gut feeling to mask an ugly personal prejudice. A risk, Captain? Sarah asked, her eyes narrowing. Are you prepared to articulate specifically what rule of airmanship I have broken? My attitude has been to follow standard operating procedure, a procedure you were willing to ignore. Don't you twist my words, Robert roared, finally losing his composure. He jabbed a finger at her. I know your type. You come in, box ticking and quota filling, thinking you know everything. You're a danger, and I'm grounding this flight. He reached for his phone. I'm calling James in operations. I'm telling him I'm refusing this leg until they find me a qualified first officer, someone I can trust, not some diversity hire. The words spoken with such venom were designed to shatter her, to make her cry or scream or quit. Sarah Washington did none of those things. She simply watched him, her expression hardening from professional calm to something cold and appraising. She saw a man in a full-blown panic, a man so terrified of her competence that he was willing to professionally self-destruct. You're making a grave mistake, Captain Mitchell, she said, her voice quiet. The only mistake was letting you on this flight deck, he snarled, holding his phone to his ear. James? Yeah, it's Robert up here on the 700. Listen, we have a problem. No, not the aircraft. It's the new FO Washington. She's not up to standards. No, I'm not comfortable. She's insubordinate. Her experience is questionable. I don't care. I am refusing to fly with her. You heard me. I will not take this aircraft into the air with her in the right seat. Find me a replacement. Find me, Tom. Find me anyone or Mr. Cole stays on the ground. He listened for a moment, his face growing smug. Good. I'll wait. He clicked off the phone and tossed it onto the dashboard. He leaned back, crossing his arms. See? That's how it's done. Operations is finding a replacement. You can go wait in the FBO. You're grounded, Washington. Pack your things. From the cabin, a curtain was pulled back. The young flight attendant, Emily, looked in, her face pale. Captain, Mr. Cole, is asking what the delay is. He's on a very important call. Tell Mr. Cole we have a minor crew issue and close that curtain, Robert bellowed. Emily flinched and vanished. Robert looked back at Sarah, expecting to see her defeated, but she hadn't moved. She hadn't unbuckled. She was just looking at him. What are you, deaf? I said, get out, he said. Sarah slowly, calmly reached into her flight bag. She didn't pull out a manual or her credentials. She pulled out her own personal cell phone. You called James, the director of flight operations, she said, her voice conversational. Damn right, I did. Robert scoffed. He knows my standards. Yes, he does, Sarah agreed. She dialed a number. But when I have an HR issue this significant, I find it's better to call James's boss. Robert's smug expression faltered. What are you talking about? James's boss is the COO. No, Sarah said as the call connected. His boss is me. She put the phone on speaker. Hi, James, it's Sarah. I'm on the G700 registry N700A. Yes, the Teterboro to Van Nuys leg. Robert's blood turned to ice. James, I'm sitting here with Captain Robert Mitchell, Sarah continued, her eyes locked on his. He just called you, correct? Refusing to fly? What was his stated reason? James's voice, tiny and panicked, came over the speaker. Ms. Washington, I had no idea you were, he said. He said you were an unqualified risk. I was trying to find Captain Rodriguez to smooth things over. An unqualified risk, I see. Sarah said, Thank you, James. Please stay on the line. I am officially grounding Captain Mitchell effective immediately. I want security to meet him at the FBO, and I want you to pull his entire training file and flight history. Specifically, I want to see if he's completed the mandatory maintenance bulletin on the G700's auxiliary hydraulic system, the one sent out last Tuesday. Right away, Miss Washington. Right away. Sarah disconnected the call and looked at Robert. Robert Mitchell was no longer red. He was a ghostly, sickly shade of pale. The blood had drained from his face, leaving his skin looking like old parchment. Ms. Washington, he stammered. At that moment, the cockpit door opened again. This time, it wasn't Emily. It was the VVIP passenger, Marcus Cole, his face a mask of fury. "What in the hell is going on?" Cole demanded. "I'm about to lose a $10 billion acquisition because you two are playing—" He stopped. He stared at Sarah. His angry expression melted into one of pure, dumbfounded recognition. "Sarah," Cole said, his voice cracking. "Sarah Washington. Is that you? The Sarah Washington?" Robert's head swiveled between the billionaire and his co-pilot, his mind unable to process the scene. Sarah finally unbuckled her harness. She stood up, a commanding presence in the confined space. "Hello, Marcus. My apologies for the delay. We're just dealing with an internal staffing issue." She turned to Robert, her voice dropping all pretense of being a first officer. It was now the voice of a CEO, the voice of a woman who signs a $75 million checks. "Captain Mitchell," she said, her words clipping, "you asked me to keep my mouth shut. You called me a diversity hire. You refused to fly with me." She pointed to the tail number on the aircraft's registration plate visible on the bulkhead. "N700A. Do you know what A stands for, Captain?" she asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Robert just shook his head, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. "My full name," she said, "is Sarah Apex Washington. A stands for Apex Executive. I didn't just join this company, I founded it. This $75 million aircraft you were so worried about, it's my aircraft. You weren't refusing to fly with a co-pilot. You were refusing to fly with your CEO." The silence that followed Sarah's words was more profound than the soundproofed cockpit. It was an absolute void, sucking all the air and arrogance out of Robert Mitchell. The man who had moments before been a king on his throne was now just a pale, trembling man in an expensive uniform. "CEO," he whispered. The word was a puff of air. "But you're black." The words were out before he could stop them, the last pathetic gasp of his bigotry. Marcus Cole, the billionaire, let out a sound of pure disgust. "Are you out of your mind? This is Sarah Washington." She invented the fractional ownership logistics software that NetJets and FlexJet both tried to buy. She started Apex from scratch with 3 used Learjets. She's forgotten more about aviation than you'll ever know. Sarah held up a hand, silencing Marcus. Her focus remained laser-sharp on the man in the left seat. "Yes, Captain, I am the CEO, and yes, I am a black woman. These two facts are not mutually exclusive," she said, her voice like Arctic water. "I fly the line incognito once a quarter. I fly as a first officer to test my crews, to ensure professionalism, to check our safety culture, to see what my captains are really like when they think no one from corporate is watching." She leaned closer. "And you, Captain Mitchell, have given me the most thorough and appalling culture report to date. You didn't just fail this test, you have proven you are a liability to my brand, my clients, and my safety record." I didn't know," Robert stammered, his mind racing to find an escape. "It was a mistake, a misunderstanding. I was testing you. Yes, a captain's initiative test to see if you had the right stuff. You passed. You passed with flying colors. I mean, Ms. Washington." It was such a pathetic, transparent lie that Sarah almost laughed. "A test?" she repeated. "Was diversity hire part of the test? Robert was refusing to fly the final exam. You weren't testing me. You were indulging your own prejudice, and in doing so, you have cost this company a great deal." She gestured to Marcus Cole. Mr. Cole here was about to sign a 5-year, $100 million contract with Apex, an exclusive contract for his entire executive team. But I imagine after seeing my senior captain in action, he's having second thoughts. Marcus Cole crossed his arms. "You're damn right I am. Sarah, if this is the kind of dinosaur you have on your flight deck, I can't trust you with my people. This deal is off." Robert's world imploded. He saw it all flash before his eyes. The $100 million contract, his job, his reputation, his 20,000 hours of pride, all gone. "No," he pleaded, a desperate whining sound that was horrifying to hear from the once proud captain. "Please, Miss Washington, Sarah, I have a family. I apologize. I deeply apologize. It was a lapse in judgment. It won't happen again. Please don't do this." "You're right about one thing," Sarah said, her voice devoid of all pity. "It will not happen again. You are grounded, effective immediately. Take your flight bag, hand me your company credentials, and get off my aircraft." "Please," he whispered. "Now, Captain," Sarah commanded. Two large, uniformed FBO security guards appeared at the cockpit door. They had clearly been summoned by James and had been waiting for the signal. "Captain Mitchell," one guard said, his voice polite but firm. "We've been asked to escort you from the premises." Robert's entire body slumped. The fight was gone. He was a hollow shell. He fumbled with his ID, his hands shaking so badly he could barely unclip it from his epaulet. He handed it to Sarah, their fingers brushed. His skin was clammy. "Sarah," he tried one last time, his voice breaking. "Get out," she said. As the guards took his arms, Robert Mitchell, the 20,000-hour veteran, the ex-Air Force pilot, the king of Teterboro, was unceremoniously marched out of the cockpit. He was walked down the air stairs past the gleaming G700 and across the ramp in full view of the ground crews and other flight crews. It was a walk of pure, unadulterated shame. The whisper network of the ramp would have his career filleted and served before he even reached the parking lot. In the cockpit, silence reigned again. Marcus Cole finally let out a long breath. "Well," he said, "that was something." Sarah slid into the left-hand captain's seat. The leather felt cool and familiar. She strapped herself in, her movements fluid and practiced. "Marcus, my apologies." "We're still going to Van Nuys," she said, her fingers already dancing across the control panel. "Emily," she called to the flight attendant, who was peering in, her eyes wide as saucers. "Please call operations. Tell James to send Captain Rodriguez to the aircraft. He's on standby. He'll be my first officer. We'll be wheels up in 15. "Yes, ma'am. Right away, Miss Washington," Emily chirped, a newfound respect in her voice. Marcus Cole watched Sarah as she began programming the flight computer. You're flying the plane." Sarah looked up, a small, weary smile on her face. "Of course I'm a pilot, Marcus. It's what I do. And unlike Captain Mitchell, I've actually read the new maintenance bulletins." Marcus stared at her for a moment. Then a slow grin spread across his face. "You know what, Sarah? That contract, it's back on, but I have one condition." "What's that?" "Double it. 200 million. And I want a key woman clause. If you're not running this company, the deal is void. I only invest in excellence." Sarah nodded. "I can agree to that, Marcus. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a flight to pilot." As Marcus returned to the cabin, Sarah took a deep breath. The first fire was out. But now it was time for the hard karma. Captain Mitchell's firing was just the beginning. His true downfall was yet to come. The humiliation of the walk across the ramp was a searing brand on Robert Mitchell's soul. Every face he passed, baggage handlers, fuel truck drivers, fellow pilots from NetJets and FlexJet waiting for their own clients, seemed to be laughing at him. The security guards were silent, which was somehow worse. They guided him not to the main FBO lounge, but to a small, windowless administrative office in the back. Waiting for him was James, the director of flight operations. James was a man Robert had always bullied, a ground pounder he'd treated with the same disdain he'd shown Sarah. Today, James's face was stone. "Robert," James said, not standing up. He slid a single-page document across the desk. "This is your official termination notice. Your severance is voided due to gross misconduct and violation of the company's zero-tolerance anti-discrimination policy. You'll be paid for the hours you've worked this week, and that's all. Your health insurance expires at midnight." "Gross misconduct," Robert sputtered, his voice cracking. "She set me up. She entrapped me. That's That's illegal. I'll sue her. I'll sue the company. I'll go to the FAA. James leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. The look on his face was one of profound, weary disgust. You want to go to the FAA, Robert? Let's talk about that because, Sarah, Ms. Washington was right. I did pull your training records. He spun his laptop around. On the screen was a list of company-issued bulletins. This, James said, pointing to one, is Mandatory Bulletin G700 MB 3422. It was issued last Tuesday at 0900. It was emailed to all flight crews and flagged as required reading in our system. It's regarding the auxiliary hydraulic pump's O-ring tolerances on the new G700 fleet. Robert stared at the screen. He hadn't read it. He got dozens of those emails. He deleted them. He figured he'd learn it in the sim. James continued, his voice cold. The bulletin states, and I quote, "Any uncorrected or newly discovered seepage of skydrol, however minor, from the starboard auxiliary hydraulic pump housing must be treated as a mandatory no-go item pending a full borescope inspection." The bulletin was issued because a G700 in Dubai had a catastrophic pump failure at 40,000 FT after a similar minor seep was noted. Robert's blood, which had been pale with humiliation, now ran cold with a different, more primal fear. But maintenance signed it off, Robert protested weakly. They said it was within tolerance. Yes, they did, James agreed. Because you, as captain in command, told them it was residual. You set the narrative. You told them it was a spill, not a seep. They trusted you. They trusted your 20,000 hours. He leaned forward. But First Officer Washington, your unqualified co-pilot, didn't just log it. She photographed it, and she specifically logged it as a seep from fairing seam. Her log entry directly contradicted your verbal report, and her log entry is what triggered the no-go flag in the maintenance system. Robert finally understood. The call from maintenance hadn't been to clear the flight. It had been to ground it. He'd been so blinded by his rage, so focused on his phone call to James, that he'd missed the second call. While you were busy trying to get a black woman fired for doing her job, James said, his voice a quiet razor. The maintenance supervisor was running up to the ramp to tell you the plane was grounded. You were so busy ending your career. You didn't even notice you were about to start a federal investigation. Robert couldn't breathe. You didn't just refuse to fly with your boss, Robert. You were actively, illegally, and incompetently attempting to fly a $75 million aircraft with a known mandatory no-go condition. You were going to fly Mr. Marcus Cole, one of the most valuable clients in the world, across the country in an unsafe aircraft. You were the risk. You were the liability, not her. James stood up. So, by all means, Robert, go to the FAA. Please tell them your side of the story because we're sending them our story. We are sending them your termination report, your missed mandatory reading, your false maintenance report, and a formal complaint for conduct unbecoming an airman and gross negligence. Ms. Washington, as the owner of this company, is personally filing a report with the FAA. Your days as a pilot aren't just over at Apex. They're over. Period. This was the hard karma. It wasn't just that he was a bigot. It was that his bigotry had made him a lazy, incompetent, and dangerous pilot. His arrogance, which he'd always seen as his greatest strength, had been the very thing that blinded him to his own near-fatal mistake. The diversity hire he tried to ground had just saved his life, and in doing so, she had taken his livelihood. Get his things, James said to the guards, and make sure he's off the property. He is now considered a security threat. As Robert was hauled to his feet, a numb, ringing sound in his ears, he had one last devastating thought. Sarah hadn't just been checking on her crew, she'd been checking on her aircraft. That hydraulic seepage, she hadn't just stumbled upon it. She had been looking for it. She knew about the bulletin. She knew exactly what to look for. She hadn't just been a better person. She had been in every conceivable way a better pilot. The flight to Van Nuys was by all measures perfect. Captain Rodriguez, the standby pilot, was a sharp, professional man who had greeted Sarah with a simple, respectful, "Good to be flying with you, ma'am." He took the right seat without question. The irony was not lost on Sarah. Rodriguez was a Hispanic man in his late 40s. Had he been the FO, Robert Mitchell probably would have been perfectly polite, seeing him as just another guy. The venom had been reserved for her, for the dual crime of her race and her gender. They handled the flight with textbook precision. The reroute over the Rockies was smooth, the new altitude keeping them well above the turbulence Robert had been so willing to muscle through. Sarah flew the G700 with a light, practiced touch. It was, after all, her plane. She'd been one of the first to be typed, a fact she'd insisted on. "I will never sell a product I don't understand from the ground up," she told her board. When they descended into the hazy skies of the San Fernando Valley, Sarah executed a flawless landing at Van Nuys, greasing the G700 onto the runway so softly that the passengers barely felt the touchdown. As they deplaned, Marcus Cole shook her hand firmly. "Sarah, that was one of the smoothest flights of my life. My team will have the revised $200 million contract to your team by morning." He paused, then added, "And what you did back there? That was the best boardroom execution I've ever seen. You're a hell of a leader." "I'm just a pilot who insists on a high-quality cockpit, Marcus," she replied, "in every sense of the word." The next few weeks were a blur of fallout. The Teterboro incident, as it came to be known, ripped through the private aviation community. Robert Mitchell, as predicted, was blackballed. His hard karma was not a single dramatic event, but a slow, agonizing dissolution. First, the FAA launched an emergency investigation based on Apex executives' report. They subpoenaed the FBO's security footage, the maintenance logs, and the cockpit voice recorder. The CVR, which Sarah had authorized to be pulled, contained every last damning word. "Diversity hire. Unqualified risk. I will not fly with her." Faced with the undeniable proof of his bigotry and his gross negligence regarding the maintenance bulletin, the FAA issued an emergency revocation of his ATP certificate. He was grounded, not suspended, revoked. To ever fly again, he would have to retake every single exam, every check ride from private pilot all the way up, a multi-year $100,000 process no one would ever fund. He tried to sue Apex for wrongful termination. The case was thrown out in summary judgment. His own words on the CVR were the prosecution's best evidence. The judge, a no-nonsense woman, reportedly lectured his lawyer for even bringing the frivolous case to her court. He lost his high-end condo. His car was repossessed. His friends in the industry stopped returning his calls. The man who had flown F-16s and commanded $75 million jets found himself applying for a job as a dispatcher at a small regional cargo operation in rural Ohio. He didn't get it. The hiring manager had heard the story. No one would trust his judgment. Robert Mitchell, the king of the skies, was now permanently, irrevocably grounded. He was a ghost in the aviation world. A cautionary tale whispered in briefing rooms from Teterboro to Dubai. He was the man who had it all and threw it away because he couldn't stand to see a black woman in the seat next to him. The shock waves of the Teterboro incident did not stop at the FBO gate. They radiated outward, shaking the very foundations of Apex executive air. For Sarah Washington, the $200 million contract signature from Marcus Cole delivered via courier the very next morning was not a victory trophy. It was a promissory note, a $200 million reminder that her company had a cancer and she had just been forced to perform emergency surgery on the ramp. Now she had to ensure the disease was truly gone. Her first meeting was not with her lawyers or her PR team. It was an emergency all-hands meeting in the main hangar, standing in front of the very G700 Robert Mitchell had tried to fly. The aircraft was back, having been given a full bill of health by a specialist engineering team. Sarah stood on a small platform, no podium, just a microphone. Every employee who wasn't in the air was there. Pilots, flight attendants, maintenance crews, dispatchers, accountants. The mood was electric with fear and rumor. "Good morning," she began, her voice echoing slightly. "Most of you know me as Ms. Washington. Most of you see me in the boardroom. Some of you, as you now know, have seen me in the cockpit. I've always believed that a CEO who doesn't understand the daily work of their employees is just a glorified accountant. So I fly the line. I see what you see. I face what you face." She paused, her eyes sweeping across the crowd. "Last week on this aircraft, I faced something that I will not tolerate. I'm not here to relitigate what happened. The cockpit voice recorder, the maintenance logs, and a dozen eyewitness accounts have made the facts painfully clear. Captain Robert Mitchell was terminated for gross misconduct, active discrimination, and a horrifying breach of safety protocol." A murmur went through the crowd. "He was not fired for being a dinosaur," she continued, her voice hardening. "He was not fired for a lapse in judgment. He was fired because his arrogance made him a dangerous pilot. He was fired because his prejudice made him incompetent. He chose to ignore a mandatory maintenance bulletin. He chose to bully a first officer who was in that moment the only person in the cockpit actually doing their job. He was a liability, and I will not tolerate liabilities in my company." She looked at the pilots, a sea of white male faces with a few notable exceptions. "This is not about sensitivity training. This is about safety. Prejudice is a distraction. Arrogance is a blinder. If you are looking at your co-pilot and seeing their skin color, their gender, or their age instead of their instruments and their checklists, you are not a pilot. You are a passenger with a good seat, and you have no place on my flight deck." She then turned to James, the director of flight operations, who was standing at the side, pale and sweating. "I'm sure you're all wondering about the failures in the chain of command. James, step up here." James looked like he was walking to his own execution. He joined her on the platform. "Captain Mitchell," Sarah said, addressing the crowd, but looking at James, "felt empowered to call his direct superior and demand a qualified pilot, which was a clear, bigoted code word." "James, what was your response?" James swallowed, his voice shaking as he spoke into the microphone. I tried to find a replacement. I tried to smooth it over. I was wrong. I was intimidated by Captain Mitchell. He was a senior captain, and I failed. I failed to uphold the company's standards, and I failed to protect an FO who was being harassed." Sarah nodded. "Yes, you did. So the question is, what happens now?" She turned to James. "James has been with Apex since day one. He is a brilliant logistician, but he failed a critical leadership test, which is why for the next 6 months he is being demoted to senior dispatcher at a reduced salary. He will be on the front lines, relearning what our crews face every single day. And his replacement as interim director of flight operations will be Captain Rodriguez." A ripple of genuine surprise went through the crowd. Captain Rodriguez, the man who had flown with her to Van Nuys, stepped forward. He was respected, quiet, and known for his meticulous-by-the-book professionalism. "This is the new standard," Sarah said. "Excellence. Full stop. Your seniority, your hours, your background, none of it matters more than your professionalism today. We will be conducting a full, anonymous third-party audit of our company culture starting tomorrow. If you feel you cannot meet this standard, my door is open. We will arrange a generous severance package. For everyone else, get back to work." The meeting was just the beginning. The Teterboro incident had given Sarah a terrible gift: clarity. She saw the Robert Mitchells in her company, not as individual bad apples, but as the predictable product of a system, an industry that had for a century lionized the maverick pilot, the ex-military hotshot arrogant man who flew by the seat of his pants. Robert's gut feeling was the very thing she was trying to eradicate. Modern aviation wasn't about guts. It was about systems, checklists, and collaborative crew resource management, CRM. His bigotry wasn't just a character flaw, it was a failure of CRM. She took her clarity to the board. In the 40th floor boardroom overlooking the Manhattan skyline, she faced her board of directors. They were mostly older, white, and steeped in old money and old ways. They were happy with the $200 million coal contract. They were less happy about her next proposal. "The audit results are illuminating," she said as a slide appeared on the wall. 70% of our female and minority flight crew members report feeling undervalued or patronized by senior captains. 40% report having a safety concern overruled without justification, the exact thing Mitchell did to me. "Sarah," said one board member, a man named Arthur Bennett, "this is an HR issue, a few bad apples. Mitchell is gone. Rodriguez is in. You've handled it." "No, Arthur, I've patched it," Sarah countered, her voice sharp. "The problem is our pipeline. We hire from the same pool as everyone else. We hire ex-airline, ex-military. We hire pilots who already have 15,000 hours and potentially 15,000 hours of bad habits. We are trying to retrain a culture. I am proposing we build one from scratch." She clicked to the next slide. It read, "The Apex Executive Aviation Scholars Program." "I am proposing a $50 million 5-year investment," she said. The room went dead silent. "We will fully fund the entire aviation education from 0 hours to a full ATP rating for 20 exceptional candidates a year. We will partner with universities, flight schools, and community programs in underserved areas. We will find the brightest minds, the most stable personalities, the most dedicated young people who would never have been able to afford a cockpit." "50 million?" Bennett sputtered. "Sarah, this is social engineering, not business." "It's the best business we'll ever do, Arthur," Sarah said, her voice dropping to a calm, intense level. "A full ATP rating costs upwards of $150,000. It's an insurmountable barrier to entry for most of the population. This isn't about charity. This is about supply. This is about creating a pipeline of pilots who are trained in the Apex way from their very first hour. They won't learn checklist discipline as a suggestion. They'll learn it as a religion. They won't learn CRM as a corporate buzzword. They'll learn it as the fundamental basis of flight. And when they graduate, they will have a 5-year contract with us. We will have in 10 years the most professional, most dedicated, and most loyal pilot corps in the entire industry. This isn't a diversity program. It's a talent acquisition program on a scale no one else is attempting." She looked at each of them. "Robert Mitchell cost us a $100 million contract, and he nearly cost us a $75 million jet. One man, one bad day, one lifetime of unchallenged arrogance. This program is a $50 million insurance policy to ensure that never happens again. The coal contract more than pays for it. This is our future. The motion is on the table." It passed unanimously. 9 months later, Robert Mitchell sat in a beige, windowless office in Omaha, Nebraska. The smell of stale coffee and industrial carpet cleaner was overwhelming. He was 59 years old. His silver hair was now a dull, thinning gray. He had lost his condo. His wife had left him, taking the last of their joint savings. He was applying for a job as a night shift dispatcher for a small puddle jumper cargo airline. The interviewer, a man half his age, was looking at his resume. 20,000 hours, the interviewer said, whistling. F-16s, 747s, Gulfstreams. "Robert, you're way overqualified for this. Why do you want to be a dispatcher?" "Just looking for a change of pace," Robert mumbled, his eyes on the floor. "Ready to stay on the ground for a while." The interviewer tapped his pen. Mitchell. Why do I know that name?" He typed something into his computer. His eyes widened. He clicked a link, then another. He read for a full minute, the silence stretching. Then he slowly leaned back in his chair. The look on his face wasn't anger. It was a kind of fascinated disgust. "Oh my God," the interviewer breathed. "You're that guy, the Teterboro guy, the diversity hire guy." Robert's face burned crimson. That was a misunderstanding. It was all... She set me up. The interviewer held up a hand. Save it. Wow. Just wow. He closed Robert's folder and stood up, pushing the resume back across the desk as if it were contaminated. I think this interview is over, Mr. Mitchell. We're a small operation. We all have to trust each other here. Can't have, a liability. The word hit Robert like a physical blow. He staggered out into the bleak Nebraska afternoon. A man with 20,000 hours of experience who was now officially unemployable. The hard karma wasn't just that he'd lost his job. It was that he had become a living ghost, a cautionary tale that would follow him to every corner of the industry he had once ruled. At that very same moment, Sarah Washington was standing in a different kind of room, a university lecture hall filled with the 20 brightest, most excited faces she had ever seen. It was the inaugural class of the Apex Executive Aviation Scholars. They were from Detroit, from the Bronx, from rural Appalachia, from South LA. They were valedictorians, community leaders, and math whizzes. And they were all about to learn to fly. Sarah was giving the keynote address. They will tell you that you don't belong, she was saying, her voice filled with a passion that silenced the room. They will look at your face, your name, your background, and they will try to put you in a box. They will call you a scholarship kid. They will whisper that you are a token or a quota. They will try to make you feel small. They will do this because they are small. She walked to the edge of the stage. I am here to tell you that you are not here because of my charity. You are here because of your excellence. You are here because you are the best. We didn't lower the bar to find you. We searched in places no one else was bothering to look. And now your job is simple. You must be better. When they're done with pre-flight in 5 minutes, you take 10. When they glance at the weather, you study it. When they learn the emergency checklists, you memorize them. You will be so good, so professional, so flawless that their prejudice has no air to breathe. It will choke and die in the face of your competence. You are not the diversity hires of the future. You are the standard. People like Robert Mitchell, she said, using his name for the first time, believe that competence is a fixed object, that their 20,000 hours of experience means they can stop learning. That is the most dangerous belief a pilot can have. I promise you, the day you think you're the best, the day you think you have nothing left to learn is the day you must hand in your wings, because that is the day you become a liability. You are the new horizon, she finished. You are the future of this company. You are the apex standard. Now who's ready to fly? The applause was deafening. 1 year later, the cockpit of N700A, the same G700, was bathed in the orange glow of a sunset over the Atlantic. They were en route to London, climbing smoothly through 39,000 left. In the left seat, Sarah Washington sipped her coffee. In the right seat, First Officer Jessica Martinez, age 23, expertly handled the comms with Shanwick Oceanic Control. Shanwick, Apex 700 Alpha, request climb flight level 410. Jessica was the valedictorian of the first scholarship class, a brilliant young woman from Miami who spoke 3 languages and had a degree in aerospace engineering. She had in 1 year consumed flight training with a ferocious, joyful intensity. Their pre-flight in Teterboro had been a masterclass in professionalism. Sarah had watched as Jessica conducted the walk-around, noting how she spent extra time under the starboard wing, her flashlight meticulously checking the very pump that had started it all. She hadn't just passed the test, she had embodied the lesson. Good catch on the winds aloft, Jessica, Sarah said. Filing for 410 early saved us a battle with that jet stream. Thank you, Captain, Jessica said, her eyes scanning the instruments. The turbulence model suggested it would be rough at 390, but the temp dev was better up here. I figured a smoother ride for the passengers. Sarah smiled. She had taught them. My job as captain is to be the final authority. Your job as first officer is to challenge me with data. The best pilot is the one who is most prepared. Jessica had been prepared. They flew in comfortable, professional silence for a time. the deep hum of the Rolls-Royce engines the only sound. "Ma'am," Jessica said finally, her voice hesitant, "can I ask you something personal?" "Go ahead, Jessica." We all know the story about Captain Mitchell. It's legend. Were you scared?" Sarah watched the curve of the earth, black sky above, orange fire below. "Scared?" she said. "No. I was angry. Angry for every pilot passed over, every attendant disrespected, and for how ego nearly killed us all. I wasn't scared, Jessica. I was driven." She turned to her first officer. "He thought I was a risk, a diversity hire. But people like us don't get free passes. We work twice as hard to be seen as equal, which is fine." She smiled. "Because when we get here, we're twice as good." She looked at the horizon. "You have the controls." "I have the controls, Captain," Jessica said as they flew into the bright night. And just like that, Captain Mitchell's career evaporated. It wasn't just his bigotry that grounded him. It was the arrogance that blinded him to his own incompetence. Sarah Washington didn't just own the plane. She owned a standard of excellence he could never meet. His gut feeling was just prejudice, and the risk he saw was the very person who caught his own near-fatal mistake. He thought he was the king of the skies, but he was just a liability. Sarah's hard work and dedication put her in the CEO's chair, and her refusal to compromise on safety or respect is what kept her there. This is a story of hard karma where the glass ceiling wasn't just broken, it was owned by the woman he tried to keep on the ground. What did you think of Robert's downfall? Was it justified? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single one. If you love stories where arrogance meets its match, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to see it. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more real-life karma stories every week. Don't forget to ring the bell so you never miss an update.